Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Sunday, June 9th. It is another week closer to the NFL season. I believe 13 weeks away, I think, or something like that. I saw this morning, 13 Sundays away from week one. So getting closer. This is episode 16 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. As always, make sure to please like and subscribe. Appreciate all the support as always. DiMari, we got a lot to discuss today. We've talked a lot about receivers over the last couple weeks because there's been a lot of receiver news, but this week it's all about the quarterbacks, with a certain current quarterback taking some shots at a present quarterback of the New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers, also giving his thoughts on his top five quarterbacks right now. So we'll break it all down. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. So, like you said, football is a few weeks away, but tonight might be like the ending of football UFL championship today. I believe 7 o'clock. So that's gonna be pretty fun to watch. But yeah, it's been a lot of receiver heavy topics, receiver heavy shows. So for the viewers, we are going to get into some quarterbacks today, like you said, and we're gonna have a great show. A lot of interesting things kind of with the quarterbacks over the last few days. So let's get into it.
Yep. Yeah, today I believe for the UFL it's the conference championships, right? Or was that
I
yesterday?
could be wrong. I know it was a championship game, just at 7 o'clock today. I've
Today, okay.
had have not watched too much UFL, but
Yeah,
seen
neither
it
have I.
pop up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not I haven't watched a ton. I know I saw a highlight. I've seen a couple highlights, I know, but I haven't, to be very transparent with you guys. I've only really seen highlights. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched the game yet. So, but anyway, good thing we're not talking about any UFL stuff. So you don't have to worry about us putting some bad takes out there about
Yeah.
UFL or whatever the case may be. But yeah, we'll break down CJ Stroud. We'll get into his top five list. We'll also get into another top five list that was released this week that was kind of crazy. Seems like a troll, seems like engagement farming, whatever it was. We'll break it down. And then we'll get into Jalin Hyatt, Giants wide receiver, saying that they are a playoff team, which was kind of caught by surprise confidence, but we'll break down if that actually will happen, which the likelihood is probably not very high that happens. But we'll break it down anyway a little later on. So we'll start with CJ Stroud. He was on an interview this week, or did like a podcast interview this week. It was called the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast. Him and Tank Dell were there, and Stroud made plenty of comments, answered plenty of questions on various different things around the NFL. But one of the biggest things was Stroud, in a way, I guess, kind of going after Aaron Rodgers, because there was two separate cases in the interview that he directed something towards Rodgers. The first one was saying he would take Eli over Rodgers, and then the second one was saying that he thinks that if Matthew Stafford, just using that player as an example, he said if Stafford had what Rodgers had in Green Bay, he would have probably won 3 or 4 rings as opposed to Rodgers' one. So we'll break that down a little later on. But just to start, before we release whether or not we actually believe that Stroud was correct, whose career you would rather have, what was your overall thoughts on the comments made from Stroud this week?
I like Stroud a lot, but
Yeah.
that Rodgers and Stafford kind of flip flop. I just disagree with it. I mean, I think when people kind of look at quarterbacks, it's all based off of, okay, your playoff success. And we're going to get into it later. But a thing with quarterbacks, I don't think people really understand is like, especially in the playoff time, it's not all on the quarterback. And I know you've heard me say that over and over and over. So just because you necessarily flop the two and you put Stafford in Aaron Rodgers' position, whatever, doesn't necessarily mean he would have more Super Bowls, because it's the team around you, it's the head coaching, it's all different type of things that go into it and like play a factor into it. So I don't agree with it whatsoever. I mean, Rodgers had a great career in Green Bay. When it's all said and done, like that, the jersey is getting retired. He's going into the Ring of Honor. So I don't really think Stafford kind of would have stepped in and made a huge difference, because before Sean McVay, like Stafford really wasn't doing much in Detroit, even though it is Detroit. But I don't know. Basically, I don't see what Stafford has done just so well and just excelled at so amazingly to where you think you put him in Green Bay and all of a sudden they have won 3 or 4 Super Bowl rings, when Rodgers can be argued as one of the greatest top 3 quarterbacks like ever played a game. So it was kind of ridiculous for Stroud. He lost some cool points for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that opening statement there by you. Like, I like Stroud a lot. He's a great quarterback. Last year was amazing. You know, I was rooting for them when they got to the playoffs. It was really cool to see him win a playoff game. Just he's stud. He's a stud in this league. He's only getting better. You guys know how I feel about the Texans. I've mentioned many times in the podcast. I think they are arguably one of the most talented rosters of football. I think the Texans, when all is said and done, will probably come away as the 1 seed in the AFC this year. I'm probably more high on them than a lot of people are. But what I saw last year was kind of the first year of a young core that is going to be special for at least 3-4 more years before, of course, you're going to have to pay all those guys and some guys will have to break away. But that's way down the road. These guys are all young. They're all growing and learning together. They added Stephon Diggs. They added all these pieces. Texans are going to be really good this year. I think they'll probably win the AFC. That's just me. But what Stroud said was a lot of it was a little crazy. And so far through his career too, you know, he hasn't opened up his mouth much. He's kind of stayed under the radar, at least last year. But, you know, he has 1 year under his belt now. Now it's kind of like, okay, going into year 2, won Rookie of the Year. Now he'll probably chase a potential MVP this award this season. He'll certainly be in the conversation. And now he's kind of, I don't want to say cocky, but it was the first time that you got like a different vibe, I guess, from CJ Stroud. And yeah, the Matthew Stafford stuff was crazy. If Matthew Stafford was, and look, Matthew Stafford, very good player, respect him, you know, he deserved that Super Bowl that he won with the Rams. After everything that he went through in Detroit, it was great to see him win that Super Bowl. But I don't think you can't tell me that Stafford on that Packers team is winning. You just to begin with, Stafford's not the better. Rodgers is 10 times better than Matthew Stafford. Like Matthew Stafford, if you gave him the same tools as Aaron Rodgers had in Green Bay, it wouldn't work out any better than it already did because Stafford's not better than Rodgers. Rodgers is 10 times better. And people act like Rodgers had all these weapons in Green Bay. They never gave this guy a first-round draft pick receiver. I know they gave him Devontae Adams, second-round pick, right? Or something along those lines. It was day 2 guy. I know he had Jordy Nelson, but he ended up kind of retiring, of course. He had a couple other pieces there, but for the most part, it was Devontae Adams. That was all he had. And I understand. I'm not downgrading Devontae Adams, but let's give credit where credit's due. A big reason why Devontae Adams is the player he is today is because of Aaron Rodgers. I think most people can agree on that. So, yeah, I mean, Stafford never won a Super Bowl with Megatron. So you can't sit here and tell me he's going to win a Super Bowl with Devontae Adams. Right? You know, I don't know. Maybe that's crazy of me, but people act like Rodgers had this trio of 3 dominant receivers and these great tight ends and all that stuff. I mean, not really. He had, Jordy Nelson was good. He had Devontae Adams, who was very, great. But I mean, outside of that, it was primarily that. And quarterback, a win-loss stat is not always the stat either to grade quarterbacks on. Because I always say this. I go back to Super Bowl 50, 2015, right? Everyone wants to talk about Super Bowls and quarterbacks, and you mentioned it here at the Open, right? Everybody thinks, the only reason, quarterbacks are a massive reason why teams win and lose, but people act like the only reason a team can win a Super Bowl is because of a quarterback, or the only reason teams win, it ultimately falls on the quarterback. Nothing else matters. The Super Bowl that year was won by Peyton Manning and Denver Broncos. Peyton Manning did not do much of anything that year. He had 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. He played 10 games. It was that defense that the Denver Broncos rolled out every single week that dominated and made Cam Newton, who had the best year of his life, look silly, actually scared to jump on a fumble during that game. As we all know, we've seen that clip plenty of times. So I don't know. I thought the Stafford stuff was a little crazy, but that was just me. So any other thoughts on the Stafford stuff before now we get on to the Manning and the conversations there and really the biggest topic that came out of this?
Yeah, I do just want to chime in because I think you kind of hit it right on the head. Like the point of, it's not like he had just a bunch of weapons surrounding him in Green Bay. I mean, it's not like he had what Brock Purdy has in San Francisco or what CJ Stroud has now in Houston. He's really had, I guess you could say, one just guy that really kind of elevated everyone else, and everyone else kind of just did their part. So I don't understand where this is coming from. Like you said, if Stafford didn't win a Super Bowl with Megatron, then I mean, there's no hope he's going to Green Bay and win the Super Bowl over there. Not at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And And like we said, like I mentioned that, the year, the year that the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010, Rodgers had Donald Driver, he had Greg Jennings, obviously he had Jordy Nelson, as we all know. But after that run, it was a talking point every year. It was a talking point every year when they would pass up on a receiver. It's like, what are you doing? Remember when they took Jordan Love? Everyone was like, why are you taking Jordan Love? You need receivers. And after that year in 2010, it was really, once they obviously brought in Devontae Adams, I believe 2014, it was really Devontae Adams and nobody else for those next 6-7 seasons. So it's interesting, but I don't really think, all respect, with all respect to Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers aren't even on the same stratosphere when you compare the two. I mean, of course, I know they have the same amount of Super Bowls. We want to grade that, but I mean, they also, let's be honest here, that Rams team, they built a super team in LA that year. So a little bit different. But now on to the real stuff. Eli Manning versus Aaron Rodgers. So CJ Stroud, on top of saying that Stafford would win more Super Bowls than Rodgers did, he said that he would rather have Eli Manning's career than Aaron Rodgers' career. Now, I could see both sides of this, right? I think me as a Jet fan, I think there's a lot of Jet fans out there that are very defensive. Two quarterbacks in the same city. Obviously, Eli retired now, but two quarterbacks that are playing, that have and are currently playing. There's Jersey, New that all Eli Manning, and there's a side that is all Aaron Rodgers. I could see both sides of it. I understand the argument that is being made that Eli Manning would rather have him because he has the 2 Super Bowls and people value rings more than other stuff. I also understand the side of Aaron Rodgers because he's just flat out better than Eli Manning in every single statistical category, plus other accolades such as Pro Bowls, All Pros, and MVPs. So I guess just to start, what was your overall reaction to the Eli and Rodgers comments?
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about it off air. And if I had to pick a side, I mean, I think you kind of maybe swayed me to where I guess the answer is just not as solid as I think. Because kind of looking at both careers lined up, you can say outside of the Super Bowls, Rodgers has had a better career. He's still going. I know we talked about this, I think, last time, where if Rodgers won a Super Bowl with the Jets, like that should definitely just put him over the top of a lot of other guys. But for Eli, I mean, that is a pretty impressive resume. So you have here just simple accolades, all pros, kind of everything we need.
Yeah.
And
And
Rodgers is just blowing everything away. Everything away besides Super Bowls. And I guess you can say Eli, I haven't mentioned here, Eli does have a better, you could say better playoff record, 8-4 compared to Rodgers, 12-10.
Yeah.
But just looking at these numbers, I mean, there's no way 35 rushing touchdowns. Like there's just no way anyone's taking Eli over Rodgers. If you take those Super Bowls out, or even if Eli has one Super Bowl only, both of them one Super Bowl MVP, Rodgers 10 out of 10 is your answer. I think it's the fact that he won 2, both were against Brady. People lean Rodgers, but people lean Eli, but there's just no way people really think Eli is a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you look at this list here. He is green in every statistical category. And I know people won't, stats aren't the end all be all, but if you are, there's 2 ways people look at careers. They either look at it with all championships or they'll look at it with other stuff. If you're looking at as I only care about championships, then you're probably taking Eli with the 2 Super Bowls. But Eli doesn't even have an MVP. Eli doesn't even have an All-Pro. Eli only went to 4 Pro Bowls. Aaron Rodgers, 10 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pros, 4 MVPs. I mean, that is just crazy, crazy stuff. And James Jones, who was on Speak this week, I don't know if you saw this clip, but this is actually what swayed me, because I'll admit, when I talked to you, remember, off air last week, I said I actually agreed with CJ Stroud at first. I would rather Eli's career because of the Super Bowl rings and the fact that he won the 2 in New York. Winning in New York is different, really different than winning anywhere else. You know, for the hockey fans out there, Mark Messier is always a classic example to bring up. He won all the cups that he won in Edmonton all those years. Nobody ever talks about them. They only talk about the one cup that he won in 1994 with the New York Rangers. That's the only thing that he's talked about. The same thing with Rodgers. If Rodgers wins a Super Bowl with the Jets, nobody's ever going to talk about the playoff exits in Green Bay. Nobody's probably ever going to talk about that Super Bowl he won in Green Bay. It's only going to be the Jets Super Bowl that he won. Obviously, the second Super Bowl franchise history, ending the 50-plus year drought, all that stuff. But James Jones brought up a good point about the Super Bowls. If we are going off of guys that are like Super Bowl champions over guys that, let's just say, if we're going off of players with more Super Bowls than other players, then you're going to tell me, if that's the way you're going to debate things, then you're going to tell me you would rather have Nick Foles' career or Joe Flacco's career or Trent Dilfer's career over Dan Marino. That's what you're telling me. So if you would rather be Nick Foles than Dan Marino, because Nick Foles, of course, has the Super Bowl, Flacco's the Super Bowl, Marino never won one. So if you're going off of Super Bowls and your only way of debating that Eli is better than Rodgers, or you would rather have Eli's career, then you need to keep that same energy and say that you would rather have Nick Foles and Joe Flacco's career over Dan Marino, which I think is crazy. Dan Marino is one of the more talented quarterbacks to ever play the game. So it's another way I view it. And that's what ultimately changed my opinion, because at first I looked at, man, winning 2 championships in New York, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, all that great stuff. One of them, he, you know, as we know, beat the Packers to get there. And it's like, but when you look at it, it's Eli over Rodgers just because of one extra Super Bowl. Then you're telling me you'd rather be Joe Flacco than Dan Marino, Joe Flacco or Nick Foles. I mean, how do you view that, I guess?
Yeah, I think I've never really looked at it that way. Like, that is a great point right there. Or just even, I'm just name some other guys like a Mike Vick, some guys that were just exceptional players, had great careers, absolutely highlight reel of a player, but they don't have a Super Bowl. And then you take one guy, like you just said, a Nick Foles, who just happened to step in during this run, and you're just like, oh, well, just give me Nick Foles because he has that one Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Well, if that was your case, if you were just hiring or looking for a quarterback off of Super Bowls, and your go-to is Nick Foles over Dan Marino or Nick Foles over Mike Vick, well, you're probably only going to coach maybe half a season or be a GM for half a season, because they're going to get you out of it. So Super Bowls really, they mean a lot, but then again, they don't mean anything, because like you just said, again, with Rodgers, it's a team stat. Like, it doesn't just always come down to the quarterback. I mean, even for Eli, it literally took just the most bizarre catch you're probably ever going to see in your life off a helmet. Like, guys were kind of elevated around him. But another point I kind of want to chime into with Rodgers is the fact he stepped in after Brett Favre. I think no one really talks about that. Like, a Hall of Fame quarterback already, and you have to step into his shoes and just completely just blown the expectations out of the water, if you ask me. So to step in after Brett Favre, where you kind of know everything is like, this is what we need you to be. This is what we just had for this many years. We need you to do this or be better. So for him to do that, to step into those shoes and just have the great career that he's had in Green Bay, outside of that Super Bowl, the second Super Bowl from Eli, again, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that says Eli Manning had a better career than Aaron Rodgers, or I would rather have Eli's career than Aaron Rodgers. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't even think that shouldn't even been an argument, if we're being honest.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people have said. No disrespect to Eli, but it feels like putting Eli and Rodgers' name into the same sentence is a little disrespect to Rodgers because of what he's been able to do. I mean, and two, you look at the numbers. I know it's only 5 more games, but Eli has played 5 more games than Rodgers. So if you want to, say, oh, he played more games and use that as your argument towards Rodgers still having better numbers than him in less games played, then you can do that. But I mean, He had
far
Rodgers.
less
This is crazy to
games
me.
played.
Yeah, this is crazy to me. Rodgers has 475 touchdown passes. Eli 366. So Rodgers has 109, right? 109 more touchdown passes than Eli Manning, which is just wild to me. And then you look at interceptions. Rodgers has thrown 105. Eli threw 244. So he's got what? 144 minus 538, 138 more interceptions than him. I mean, that is just crazy, crazy stuff. And you're putting them into he's putting them into the same sentence. I mean, it's just wild. I mean, even passer rating. Rodgers 103.6, Eli 84.1. Yards per game. Rodgers 255.6, Eli 241.6. We talked about the Pro Bowls, we talked about the All Pros, we talked about the Super Bowl MVPs, or the MVPs. Super Bowl MVPs, obviously Eli has more. It's also it's one more Super Bowl title. I'm not saying the Jets are winning the Super Bowl, but Rodgers is still in the league. It's not crazy to say that he can at least win another one. I mean, this might not even be. Please pray to the football gods that this is no longer that they have the same amount of Super Bowls by February. That would be ideal. But I mean, it's like I think Stroud too is acting like Rodgers' career is over. Like this is it. No, I mean, who knows how many? Maybe this is his last year, but I don't know. I would take Rodgers. Again, at first I looked at Eli and said, yeah, the rings, but Rodgers is so much better than Eli Manning. It's not even a debate. It's not even it's not a debate. It really isn't. I mean, career passing yards 5,955. Or no, I'm sorry, 59,055. Eli Manning is 57,023. So Rodgers has 2,000 plus more passing yards. I mean, the numbers, I'll throw them back up on the screen here. This is exactly what I'm reading from. The numbers are just crazy the difference between the two. And as I talked about earlier, and James Jones is the guy that who was on Speak, of course, brought this up. If you're telling me about the Super Bowl rings, then you better tell me that you think Joe Flacco, you'd rather be Joe Flacco or you'd rather be Nick Foles. You think they're better than Dan Marino. If we're talking about just rings, we're going off that argument.
Just look at the difference in the passer rating, which something that's not on here, but I have written here is Rodgers is a 4-time passing rating leader, 2-time passing touchdown leader, which just is crazy. And I know I honestly think passing rating is probably the most efficient stat to grade a quarterback on, because it's just how consistent are you. That's how I kind of look at it. So 4 times to win that award 4 times, he's efficient, and it's showing with the numbers. 475 touchdowns, 105 interceptions is absolutely insane. Especially for someone who throws the ball 40, 50 times a game, majority of the times.
Yeah. No, yeah, totally agree. And you even look at the head-to-head numbers between the two. I know some of them, obviously Eli came out on top. Playoffs, they're 1-1 against each other. Regular season, Rodgers has the advantage 3-1, 3-1. But you look at the regular season, let's say, right? Again, winning and losing is not always 100% on the quarterback. We talked about that to open up the show here. Rodgers statistically was better in the 6 games that he played against Eli in his career. Rodgers was statistically just a better quarterback. You look at the regular season. In his career, Rodgers against Eli in the regular season, he threw 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in those 4 games he played against him. Eli in those 4 games, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Let's look at the completion percentage. Rodgers against Eli in the regular season, 58.8. Eli against Rodgers in the regular season, 53.6. Rodgers, 1,251 yards against Eli in the regular season. Eli against Rodgers, 1,096. Passer rating, Rodgers 98.2, Eli 86.5. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, playoff wise too, Rodgers has better complete percentage, better passer rating, more touchdowns and less interceptions. And I know there were 500 there, but in a lot of those games they played against each other, even the games Rodgers lost in, he was still the better quarterback. So, I don't know. maybe I'm biased because I'm a Jet fan, not a Giant fan. But and let's be honest with you too. I mean, I'm a Jet fan, but I've only watched Rodgers 4 snaps, so it's not like I'm a Packers fan. I've seen this guy play for 10 years, and I'm super, super biased. I mean, this is all me hoping that Rodgers is gonna do some great things. If he doesn't, then I don't know. If he plays 8 snaps with the Jets, I'm done. Yeah.
Look, like I said, I can tell you this. I've watched a lot of Rodgers cooking of Dallas, a lot of Rodgers of cooking Dallas and Lambeau, cooking Dallas and Arlington, cooking Dallas and Brazil. It doesn't matter where they play. I've seen a lot of Aaron Rodgers cooking. And I can tell you, as a Dallas fan, I have never in my life gone into a Giants game scared of what Eli Manning is going to do to the Cowboys. I would get night sweats the night before playing Aaron Rodgers to what Aaron Rodgers is going to do to that Cowboys team on Sunday. That's all I can tell you from that. So I think you are in pretty good hands with Rodgers as your quarterback right now. You got nothing to worry about. It was only a few snaps, it's only 11 seconds of play time. But I guarantee you that 12 second and beyond is going to be special this year when Aaron Rodgers gets back on the field.
Yeah. Hopefully. Please let that be the case. You know what's crazy? Just look at the numbers here. Eli Manning threw 22 pick sixes in his career. Rodgers threw 4. Never knew that. That is just wild stuff. Right. So I'm taking Rodgers. The one more ring for Eli. You want to go off of that. But if you're going to go off of that, then once again, for the third time, you're telling me that Nick Foles is you're telling me you're going to take Foles over Marino or Flacco over Marino, which is crazy. I don't even know where that is. That's not even I don't even know where you rank that. And again, if you want, I know the argument was ultimately like, who would you rather be? Which career would you rather be? I'm still taking Rodgers' career.
100%.
And I'm still taking Marino over Nick Foles' career. I mean, come on now. Nick Foles, what are we doing here? So anyway, now we move on to another take from CJ Stroud, his top 5 quarterback list. Would you say that this might have been potentially the best thing that he said on the show? Maybe the most accurate, right? Or potentially?
I would say the most accurate. I feel like a few things probably should have flipped with his listing when we get into it, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. So this is his list based off of last season. This is what he said on the show. Mahomes, Lamar, obviously himself, CJ Stroud, Dak 4, Jalen Hurts 5. So a couple guys off this list. Allen off the list. Obviously, Rodgers off the list. There was no chance he was making on that list. Now, this was based off of last season, so 4 snaps of Aaron Rodgers is not a top 5 quarterback, not even top 20 probably because he played 4 snaps. Burrow off the list. Jared Goff off the list, not Jordan Love off the list. So a couple of those guys that are kind of in that 10 to 5 range, potentially crack the top 5, are off the list. Probably the most surprising is probably Allen not being on the list. I feel like Allen for most is a staple on top 5 lists, but he was not here. So what was your thoughts on this list?
For the most part, it's pretty solid. I think I would change a few things. Mahomes 1. Guess we'll put Lamar at 2. I feel like that one can kind of switch. Dak 3, Stroud at 4, Hurts at 5. And a big thing I know before I told you off air, I'm gonna have me a Dak Prescott rant. But before I get into it, it's the reactions from the video and the comments in the videos that really brought this, a big part of what brought this to our attention. So a lot of people are, why is Dak up there? And why is Dak this and Dak that? Before I get into it, what is your opinion on it? And what would your re-ranking be if you had to re-rank it?
My re-ranking, I'll be honest, I think I'd probably go Mahomes. I mean, this was based off of last season, right? So that's what makes it difficult. If I'm going like overall, Burrow's on this list. I probably would replace. I'd probably
be careful here. Hurts. I might log off.
I'd probably replace Hurts with Burrow. I would also, if we're going off of, it's tough because I'll be honest. I would probably put Josh Allen on this list. I would. I still think when Josh Allen's at his best, he's top 5 quarterback of football. I would probably take Hurts out and put Allen there at 5. I would probably put Allen in. It's tough because I would definitely have Stroud or number 1 is definitely Mahomes, no doubt. I'd probably put Stroud like 5, Allen maybe 4, and then Dak 3. Potentially Allen over Stroud, possibly. I know it's tough. Allen had a lot more interceptions. Allen did throw more yards. He had more touchdowns. What do you value more? I'd say this. I would replace Allen and Hurts. I don't really think Hurts is a top 5 quarterback, I'll be honest. I would probably there's probably a good chunk of quarterbacks. I would take Burrow over Hurts. I would take Allen over Hurts. I'd probably take Love over Hurts. I would take a good chunk of quarterbacks over Hurts. Nothing against Hurts. I don't know. I like Hurts a lot. I've said it since he entered the league. I thought he'd be really good, but I don't know, I'm very skeptical with the way the Eagles are at right now. There's a lot of other quarterbacks that I would probably just take. So I'd find a way to get Allen on this list. Other than that, I mean, I'd probably maybe change. I'd probably do what you did, potentially put Dak at 3, Stroud at 4, and then Allen at 5, and then Mahomes and Lamar 1, 2. I think most people probably would stick with that.
I think that's solid. I think I really like that. I agree with Hurts. I know it's going to kind of contradict itself, where it's like how we keep saying wins and losses don't all bear down on the quarterbacks, but just seeing Hurts, like after 10-1, they didn't look good. He didn't look good, but also the defense didn't look good as well. So it's kind of, you can't put all the blame on Hurts, but
yeah, it was a meltdown. Ever since the Big Dom incident, they just fell apart.
Yeah, Big Dom. Yeah,
yep.
The glue to it all.
The glue guy.
Just I'm going to agree with you there. I would take Hurts out, put Allen. But kind of before we got into your ranking of it, I see a lot of the comments, a lot of the hate, the Dak slander, as usual. I still don't understand it. I'm really confused. So a lot of it, and also I guess we can mention it. We talked about it off air, the Kelly from Vegas ranking, which again, we don't know if it was trolling, if it was realistic, but I have a picture of it here on my phone. Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Tua, Jordan Love, all those guys above Dak Prescott. And she even had Michael Penix over Jalen Hurts. Brock Purdy at number 2. Mahomes at 8. So if for all those, everyone in their mind knows Mahomes is by far in a tier of his own. Tua, Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy, and Lamar Jackson were all rated higher than Patrick Mahomes. So obviously either she had a long night at the bar or she was trolling.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel about that list?
The Kelly in Vegas list? That was brutal. And we'll get into the other list here too, because I do think that part of my take also released a list. I think a lot of this is trolling, it seems like, engagement farming, but you still can't deny how bad it is. Tua over Mahomes on that list was just wild.
Diabolical.
I mean,
Tua. And I like Tua. I personally like Tua.
Yeah, it's not it's just Mahomes is number 1. What are we putting at Mahomes? Mahomes at 8, Purdy at 2. I mean, I know some people will attack you for this, but Purdy is a glorified game manager. Let's just call it like it is. Maybe I know some people don't like that, but if you put Purdy on any other NFL team with maybe just one number 1 receiver, that's probably a 6-win team.
Let's put Brock Purdy with Aaron Rodgers, which is Jordy Nelson, or Devontae Adams only, and let's go see him win the Super Bowl. The one that Matthew Stafford
didn't say that.
That's what we should do. That list is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way I view Purdy. I like Purdy a lot. Really cool story, but I mean, you got to find a way to start. You got to win a Super Bowl. If you got Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and you can't win a Super Bowl, and same goes for Kyle Shanahan. You have a big three of weapons on offense, and you can't win with that. You're never winning. Sorry, you're just never doing that. I mean, I know Juwan Jennings is very good, and they believe that if he continues to play well, they can potentially move on from one of Ayuk or Deebo and Juwan Jennings to take over, but I don't think you're ever going to get a core as good as Deebo, Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey, and you still can't win. Not all of it's Purdy. I don't think Purdy's the reason they lost last year, but I mean, I don't know. The Niners just, I know it's a completely different story. And I know you want to get into your Dak thing, which we can get to that here right after this. But I think the Niners are just a very weird team. I mean, they've got all this talent. They've lost Super Bowl twice. They were clearly the better team last year. They still find a way to lose. I don't know. It's not, I don't know if it's not Purdy. It's Shanahan's got to find a way to win the big game. That's all I could say. Don't want to go on a 49ers tangent, but you have all that talent, you can't win. I mean, it's very questionable.
I want you to get into it. Trust me, we have all year to talk about Dak. Like, I can use whatever I got to say all year. It's gonna come back around. Talk about Kyle Shanahan. I know we talked about it before, but I just want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot really have to add otherwise. I mean, I think it's really just like, this is a team with Ayuk, Deebo, all these pieces. Last year felt like was their year. You find a way to lose to a Kansas City Chiefs team, yes, with Mahomes, but you find a way to lose to that team with significantly less talent. And there was some questionable stuff there at the end, but I just look at it as like, I don't care whether you're facing Mahomes. I don't care whether you're facing whoever the heck you're facing. They've got to find a way to win a Super Bowl. There's no more excuses. Everybody, I feel like the Niners, everyone keeps making excuses and say, oh, well, they were facing Mahomes. Well, you were the more talented team. You were better, and you could make the case they were better defensively and offensively, and they still found a way to lose. At some point, it's got to come back to Shanahan. I mean, this is a guy that's lost 2 Super Bowls. He's lost 2 conference title games. How many more times? I mean, the one game against, I know 2022 conference title game against the Eagles a little skewed because Purdy got hurt. They didn't have a quarterback. They were running Wildcat. Fine. You want to give him a pass for that? Okay. But the year prior against the Rams, they were up in that game 17-7 going into the fourth quarter, and they blew a 10-point lead in the fourth. That can't happen. And then obviously you lose the Super Bowl in 2019 where you're up 20-10 in the fourth, and you allow 21 unanswered in the span of 10 minutes. And that's brutal. And then same thing here in this Super Bowl against the Chiefs. You were up 10-3 going into halftime, or 10-3 going into halftime. You had the 19-16 right lead, and then the Chiefs went down, kicked the field goal, so you couldn't get a stop. You had a 3-point lead. They force overtime. You settle for a field goal, and then they go down there and score with 3 seconds left in overtime. I mean, you couldn't find a way to get one more stop. You let McCole Harmon, who was leaking game plans earlier in the year, catch the game-winning touchdown. It's some of the way they've lost these games, the Niners. The way they lost in 2019, the way they lost the 2022 conference championship game, or 2021 rather, the way they lost this past year's Super Bowl. At some point, that comes back to the coach. And I know a lot of it, some of it was defensive collapses, which isn't Shanahan's expertise, but I don't know. That's my Niners rant. Now you can go to your Dak rant.
Well, I'm going to continue on the Niners. I 100% agree. And I know we talked about it multiple times, especially after the season, where if Dan Campbell and LaFleur just don't absolutely just lose their minds on the sideline, I mean, the Niners are eliminated like a lot earlier than they should be. Because even just thinking about that Green Bay game, we always talk about Detroit going for bad situations, but Green Bay had a lot of situational miscues that really changed that game. And I think similar to Detroit, Green Bay had an instance where they were kind of in the red zone or at least 25 going in, decided to go for it and got stopped short instead of just taking the points. So it's like the Niners, I don't want to necessarily say dominate the regular season, because even this past season, like we watched the Niners against Dallas and you're just like, there's nobody beating this team. And then you go watch the Niners play the Browns without Deshaun Watson, without Nick Chubb, and lose a game like that. Or you go watch Niners go play Minnesota, and you're expecting to be a complete blowout, and Minnesota goes out there and beat the Niners, like beat the brakes off the Niners. So I can't even really say they dominate the regular season, but they are one of those teams where they're in the regular season, and you're just like, perfectly like you just mentioned it, like who's beating the Niners? There's nobody beating the Niners. They're the front runners. They got all the pieces. They got the core. The three you mentioned, you didn't even mention George Kittle, which is a whole other thing.
You're right.
Who was not even thrown in there. Like they still, I know he didn't have a typical George Kittle type year. Arguably still a top 6 tight end in the league.
Yeah. I'm still taking a George Kittle down year over 90% of the tight ends.
100%. So they get into the playoffs, and like you said, it's the way they lose where the Niners are the front runners. There's no reason why Mahomes, with the worst team he's ever going to play with in all of football, the 49ers don't find a way to win that Super Bowl. There's no way when you're up 20-10 going into the fourth quarter, even though you didn't have Jimmy G on your team, but Jimmy G got you that far, you're going to lose that Super Bowl. So it's like at some point in time, and I know you mentioned this and you asked this question when the season kind of ended up. If Shanahan gets into a situation again this year where he cannot win the big game, is it time for like change with the Niners and for him? And I think that's going to be a big question coming up into this year, because it's great. Like, okay, you're getting there. You're getting to the NFC Championship. You got to the Super Bowl a few times, but you're not winning it. Like you always, the team, I'm not going to necessarily say him, but just job is not being complete. Like you're getting 98% done, not completing the job. So 49ers rank, I think perfectly. Like you said it perfect. I want to change anything you said just there. They just don't get it done. That it's as simple as that. They don't get it done. And they have the most loaded roster in football and have for a while now.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And you make a good point. You know, the way they've kind of run things with their quarterback, they obviously, after 2021, where they lost in the conference title game, they're like, all right, we have to move on. They thought they had it with Trey Lance. Part of that was Trey Lance. They missed on Trey Lance. And that's another thing, too. They've gone very lucky. How many people talk about? There is not many teams that miss on a top 5 pick and then somehow, some way hit on mystery relevant. That never happens. I don't think it's ever happened. You know, you usually when you miss on a top 5 pick, if you want a quick repair, you kind of have to do what the Jets did. You have to go out and sign a big name. You know, you miss on Zach Wilson, went out, brought in Aaron Rodgers. There's really no quick fix other than that. They got lucky that they landed Brock Purdy, or else there's a good chance that everybody would have been gone. If Brock Purdy's not the quarterback that he was, and I guess you could say about every team, like if Tom Brady was never good, Belichick, everybody would have been gone earlier. You can make that case. So I guess you could say this about every single team in football. If certain players aren't good or certain players don't pan out, then it would never work because it's always playing the what if game. But if Brock Purdy was like not some magical mystery relevant story, there's a good chance Shanahan and John Lynch would all be out of here because they would miss on the pick. They wouldn't be able to overcome it. And you would be in a spot where you don't have a quarterback. Unless if you think about when Darnold was there, unless if you thought about rolling Darnold out there. And they got lucky because they almost lost to the Packers and they almost lost to the Lions. I think if they would have lost either of those games, I think Shanahan, you could make the case, could have been gone, because for that team to lose that team to fall anywhere short but getting to the Super Bowl would have been a colossal failure, especially with the two teams they had to run through. Let's be honest here. They played Green Bay, inexperienced team that nobody expected to even beat Dallas, get to that round. They got there. And then same thing with Detroit, a team where I know that, you know, Goff, of course, got to a Super Bowl, has playoff experience, but that was still a team that it was the first year that organization saw legitimate success in a very, very long time. And if they would have almost beat you at home too. Both those games were at home. So
facts.
it's one thing to lose on the road. It's one thing if they would have had to go to Lambeau in January and lose. A warm weather team going to Lambeau, I would understand it a little bit. But I mean, both of those were in at home, and you almost lost both those. Now they didn't, but then you go and lose in the Super Bowl the way that you did. I don't know. I've never seen a core this good. Just maybe the 2007 Patriots. Like, I mean, I just thinking off the top of my head, like a team with so much talent finding a way to lose in the Super Bowl like the Niners did last year. Where 2007 Patriots, I mean, you went 16-0. You had Randy Moss. You had all these great players. They lost to Eli. So for the Eli people out there, that supports your debate. But
that's a boost.
Yeah, that's a boost. But yeah. So there's your Niners rant. It's interesting. I feel like this year they gotta win it because you know for a fact that next season Debo, Ayuk are not gonna either one of the two is not gonna be there. That's how I feel. But anyway. Dak rant now. Back to circle back to I guess we can kind of tie this into and we'll finish things out with the Jalin Hyatt thing. These were the part of my take quarterback rankings. So these were brutal. Now some of this is probably trolling, but these aren't very good, I would say. Now the top 5, I guess, wasn't awful. If you want to put Mahomes, Allen, Jackson 1, 2, 3, you could probably make that case, but I mean, I don't. Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield are not better than Dak. Herbert, I don't think is better than. I don't know. Watson, jeez. Anthony Richardson, I would say is better than. I would take Richardson over Will Levis. Tua is not in a bad spot. He's like number 12.
I'm just trying to get
Purdy number 8 is pretty high.
Mahomes, Rodgers, Wilson, Stafford. So only 4, if I'm correct, only 4 quarterbacks on this list have won a Super Bowl, correct? I don't think. Yeah.
Yes.
Mahomes,
yes.
Rodgers, Stafford, Wilson.
Yes. Because Goff lost. Purdy, of course, lost. Hurts lost. Yeah. Burrow lost.
This is I don't see what Herbert has done to be top 10. Brock Purdy is in the most, that is what I finally pieced it together. I was at work trying to piece it together with some guys I work with of like Brock Purdy's NBA comparison. It's Jason Tatum. I mean, this is a guy who is drafted into a very fortunate situation. Very fortunate situation. Like it's a little of the same, a little bit of a different. Drafted into a very fortunate situation. Obviously, Jaylen Brown was already in Boston when Jason Tatum got there. Brock Purdy with the weapons that he has, Kyle Shanahan. You play with all of these different superstars, all of these different guys that are like absolute game changers, and you really don't have to do anything, and your team is still good. So if anyone wanted to know, game 1 of the finals, Jason Tatum had 16 points, and they still managed to win by 18 against Dallas, for those who aren't up to date. So the superstar of Boston, I know I'm getting a little off track, but it's still on track. The superstar of Boston scored 16 points in game 1 of the finals, and his team still won by 18. How is that not Brock Purdy, where you don't have to do anything? All you have to do is be decent enough because everyone else around you is just has to play their regular good game. And you get an A on the group project and you don't do much.
Yep.
The list was pretty bad. That was pretty bad list. I don't understand the Dak Prescott slander. I still don't. And I feel like this ties perfectly just how we've been saying especially with the Rodgers and Manning thing. Like, is it coming down to Super Bowls and Trent Dilfer and Joe Flacco and Dan Marino? Is it come down to the Super Bowl thing? Dak's playoff record is 2-5. Now, I'm going to ask you a question here. And I know the record-wise, it's probably going to give it away, but maybe it might sway. Maybe you might sway one way. One guy, 2-5 in the playoffs, 14 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. This is through his first 7 playoff games, by the way. Another guy, I'm not going to say his name, through his first 7 playoff games, he has a 5-2 record, 12 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. That doesn't sound too great of a player to you. Do you want to take a guess who player 2 might be? He is a former player, no longer in the NFL, but it's considered a Hall of Famer, especially to that one organization he played for.
Wait, 12 touchdowns, 11 picks, he said?
In his first 7 playoff games, but a 5-2 record.
Have we talked about him today?
We have not.
Okay, so it's not Eli. They consider him a Hall of Famer?
Yes, that is correct. He's played, let me give you a little bit of a hint. He's played his whole career with one team as well. AFC one team.
That's
all the hint I can give you.
And he's not present.
He's not present. He didn't retire that long ago, but he's not present.
He didn't retire that long ago. Big Ben?
Big Ben. You are a genius. Big Ben. 5-2 in his first 7 playoff games, 12 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So I also want to pull up the stat line of some of his playoff wins through his first 7. 17 for 30, 181 yards. That was a win. 14 for 19, 208 yards, a win. 9 for 21, 123 yards, a win. Playoffs. Here, just percentage, completion percentage, which we talked about with Rodgers. 56%. And these are all the wins that I'm talking about. 56%, 73%, 58, 72, 42. And he has wins in all of those. So now to my point, to your point, to our point. I think we got to stop. We got to stop judging the quarterbacks off playoff wins, playoff losses. Well, playoff wins, playoff losses, what they do and don't do in the playoffs. Because there's no way a guy that's had 12 touchdowns and 11 interceptions in his first 7 games in the playoffs should be 5-2. But Pittsburgh always had the defense, a great defense that just really elevated when it came playoff time. Dak doesn't have that. Just so you know, Dak has played in here's 3 games where his defense has allowed 30-plus points. Other quarterbacks with defense has allowed 30-plus points. Brady is 2-3. Rodgers is 1-5. Drew Brees is 0-3. Joe Montana 0-3. Brett Favre 0-7. Peyton Manning 2-4. John Elway 0-6. And Big Ben is 0-6. Brady's the only one that has had any, you can say, success, 2-3, when his defense allows 30-plus points. Everyone else has not had any success whatsoever. So I just think and I know the ratings, and this is all going back to the ratings, and the ratings of the quarterbacks, and, you know, the first take engagement and the Prescott slander. It's so played out. Like, I really don't understand it whatsoever. Even with people kind of going on to Stroud's comments and are just like, Dak Prescott, or even the guy he was in the podcast with, like, falling off the couch, covering his face like Dak Prescott. I think how you view Dak, how you look at Dak, and how you talk about Dak says everything about a person, how their ball knowledge, and whether they just understand how sports really are played. Because it doesn't come down to one person whatsoever. But I guess that's just the way things kind of shape up. So with that being said, yes, Dak Prescott is a top 5 quarterback from last year, and I think he's a top 8 in the league right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've said this. Oh yeah, you can go.
I was gonna say, if you disagree, viewers, come find me on Twitter. We can argue all day,
Yeah.
all day.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of quarterbacks right now in the NFL that are like really good, that are not really good, I shouldn't say, that are considered, top tier quarterbacks that haven't really had the playoff success. Josh Allen, one of them, Lamar Jackson. And I throw Lamar Jackson's name out there because you look at Dak and Lamar, right? Dak has played one more playoff game than Lamar. So when you look at the numbers, Lamar Jackson's playoff stats are ugly. He's got a 57.4 completion percentage. He's had 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, which is really bad. Now you look at Dak
real quickly.
Yeah, and when you look at Dak, 64.5% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So only one more game Dak has than Lamar. And I guess if you want to use that as the argument and say, oh, well, Lamar has played less time and already has played nearly the same amount of playoff games, fine. But statistically, Dak's better in the playoffs than Lamar. And I know Dak hasn't got it done in the playoffs, but a lot of that hasn't always been on him. So my point here is same thing goes for the same exact argument goes for Josh Allen, where this is a guy that everyone talks about, great quarterback, this and that, better than, all these great things. And yet, you look at his postseason numbers, they're not, or I shouldn't say necessarily postseason numbers, because his postseason numbers are, I think, pretty good. I think he's got like 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at the actual results, and it is a team sport, totally understand that, he hasn't gotten it done either. Same thing with Dak. Some of that's defense, some of that's them. Of course, losing's on everybody. Everybody takes blame. But, you want to sit here and talk all about Josh Allen and how great he is. Very good quarterback, don't get me wrong. But where's the success in the playoffs? You want to talk about Lamar Jackson. And the same thing you could be saying about Dak. But it's proving the point to everybody's like, oh, Dak doesn't have success in the playoffs. He doesn't win games in the playoffs. Well, Lamar Jackson, who won number 1 seed last year, lost at home in the conference title game. I don't care that it was against Patrick Mahomes. Losing the conference title game at home is brutal. Josh Allen let Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals come into his home building while it was snowing and stomp on them. Josh Allen last year against the Chiefs, they were the better team, more talented. Finally got the Chiefs at home. Couldn't get the job done. So we want to talk all about Dak. We want to talk all about Dak's failures in the playoffs, especially at home. Same could be said about these other guys who have lost at home. I mean, do we want to go back to 2019? The Baltimore Ravens against the Tennessee Titans in a divisional round. Ravens got the first round bye and they lose to the Tennessee Titans. Are we going to sit here? I didn't hear everybody crushing Lamar Jackson for that. Same thing for this year with Dak and the Packers. All I heard was Dak getting crushed. Nobody talked about the 48 points that the defense put up or whatever the heck they put up because they played like trash. But statistically, Dak in the regular season was a top 3 quarterback this year. 3rd in passing yards, 1st in touchdowns, 2nd in QBR. Right in the MVP conversation. Sure, yeah, you didn't win in the playoffs, lost in the first round, but guess who else didn't necessarily have it in the playoffs? Well, Josh Allen and the Bills didn't get it done. Do not give me, they won the wild card round. They beat Mason Rudolph and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Give me a break. Okay. And in Lamar Jackson, same thing there. He beat a young CJ Stroud, first playoff game on the road, and he lost to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, who can never count Mahomes out, but let's be honest here. Mahomes and the Chiefs were one of the least talented teams you've seen win a Super Bowl in a very long time. Everybody that lost to Mahomes and the Chiefs should be disappointed, especially the Bills. I mean, McCole Harmon, when he fumbled the ball out of the end zone, he gave them that game, and they couldn't take it, and they missed the kick. Typical Bills fashion. I'm not trying to crush the Bills, but I'm just saying how everybody, those team to be like the 3 quarterbacks. And I will always say that's something that I think separates Joe Burrow in this argument is Joe Burrow has at least been able to get to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow has at least been able to take down Mahomes. And I've always said that. That's why I think Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, is the second best quarterback in football, because he's the only current quarterback right now that has actually been able to, other than two quarterbacks have beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. Two. Brady and Burrow. The only two that have done it. So my point is, my point here is like, that's why I think Burrow is on another. While he hasn't won a Super Bowl, he's at least gone there and he has been able to beat Mahomes. Now, of course, Dak hasn't had that chance to beat Mahomes. Part of it's because he's not in the AFC. But like when you talk about Allen and Jackson, who are in the same kind of conversation as Dak, they haven't been able to get over, past Mahomes. And that's why I think Burrow, with all these quarterbacks, Dak, Lamar, all these guys involved, that's why I put Burrow number 2 when he's healthy, because he's been able to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's statistically top 5, top 3. And the playoff stuff, you want to talk about the playoffs? That's fine. We can talk about that. We want to talk about the playoff success. That's great. Tell me why Josh Allen has. Tell me Josh Allen, what he's done in the playoffs. Tell me what Lamar Jackson's done in the playoffs. Tell me what Justin Herbert's done in the playoffs.
So there's just so many. Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, and as much as I like Kirk Cousins is just, it's just coming down to, well, the playoffs, but everything that lines up with anything you want to argue is so contradicting, because obviously regular season stats matter. Regular season is how you get there. You have to have a great regular season to get there. But then it's regular season doesn't matter. What do you do in the playoffs? Well, yeah, he's 2-5, 14 touchdowns, 7 picks. His defense hasn't been great. Look at Lamar Jackson, who's winning MVPs in the regular season. Come playoff time, not doing anything. And what's actually alarming is, if I'm correct, I believe these are just for the touchdowns. I believe these are just passing stats. So Dak has thrown 14 touchdowns. Doesn't account for the rushing touchdowns in the playoffs. But Lamar is a way better rusher when it comes to Dak Prescott. So he is a double the threat, passing and rushing, when it comes to just being able to manage and account for touchdowns. And you said 6 and 6, just passing alone.
Yeah,
that's Lamar, not even the rushing.
Yeah, for Lamar.
But I'm pretty sure he doesn't have 8 rushing touchdowns in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure that would have broke some type of record as a quarterback if he did. If Cam Newton didn't already break that during his stretch. So Lamar is 2-time MVP and has a great defense around him every single year. Lamar has not played with a bad defense once. And 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in the playoffs. And I don't even want to hear, oh, well, they've played less time. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter, especially in Lamar's instant, where this is a 1 or 2 seed basically every time they get into the playoffs. Win one game here in the AFC Championship, and you're not even doing that. You do it this year. Zay Flowers does fumble the ball at the back of the end zone, but you didn't look too hot. The team, they didn't look too hot just in general. So I think we got to find another way to kind of base quarterbacks off of what they do on the field for more than just the playoffs, because once again, there is no way, there's no multiverse, there's no amount of medication, anything in this world you can give me where if I had Joe Flacco and Dan Marino lined up and said, go pick one of your 2 quarterbacks, I'm picking Joe Flacco. There's not ever happening. So we got to find something else for some more accurate rankings, because playoff wins and losses it's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's, Dak in the regular season has been phenomenal. Of course, the postseason success hasn't been there, but that's, you can make the case for all these quarterbacks. And we've talked about it a lot, but I think ultimately a lot of it comes down to the star on the helmet. You play for the Dallas Cowboys, you're going to get a lot more, especially quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, you're going to get a lot more. So you're going to face a lot more scrutiny than anybody else. That's how I view it. But especially from like you said, First Take, all those shows.
Stop watching them. I promise your mental health will like get so much better. You don't have to really worry. I mean, they probably talk about the Jets 2 times every 6 months. So for a guy like me, it's a lot.
Yep, totally. All right, one more thing. We'll stay within the division here. NFC East. Jalin Hyatt said that the New York Giants, he believes, can be a playoff team. Jalin Hyatt last year in his rookie season had 23 receptions for 373 yards, no touchdowns, 16.2 yards per catch, yards per reception, rather. And we talked a little bit about the Giants last week. I mean, this is a team that roster-wise, you feel really good about Malik Neighbors. Very good player. What will he do with Daniel Jones is a question. And outside of that, you have some questions. Waller is probably retiring. They did draft Theo Johnson. They did add some pieces on the offensive line. You got Brian Burns defensively, but there still are a lot of questions. I mean, let's be honest here. You look at this Giants team. They are not a playoff team. I don't think in any stretch of the imagination. What do you make of Jalin Hyatt's comments that he feels this team can make the playoffs and do what they did in 2021?
They are not
or
the
2022.
They are definitely not the We Believe Warriors. That is not happening. That roster is bad. Just it starts with Daniel Jones. I just don't think he's there. I know he got them there once, ended up beating, I think, number 2 seed, number 1, 3 seed, 2 or 3 seed, like Vikings on the road one time. Other than that, Daniel Jones does not look good in his career. They don't have Saquon. They don't have any weapons that really jump out at you and kind of make you nervous. So, especially in that division they're playing in, like maybe if they were in the NFC South, they could get in as the second team from the division. But I don't see it happening. I love the confidence from Jalin Hyatt. You do want to boost team morale and always show that you feel like you can do something, and it shows a level of confidence I guess they got in the building that we aren't seeing, but they're not making the playoff. They're lucky to get 6 wins this year.
Yeah, I don't see it. And again, the NFC the last couple of years has been a kind of a known for their, I guess in a way, those bottom teams getting in, finding a way to get in, like 9 and 8 and stuff like that. I don't think that's going to be the case this year because you look at the way the NFC is structured. Of course, 7 teams make it. You expect Cowboys, Eagles. Then there's a really strong chance you have teams like you have Dallas, Eagles, Bears, Lions, Packers, Falcons, Bucks. You go to the West, Niners, Rams. Like you have 9 teams there that'll fight for 7 spots. And the Giants are not even close to any of those 9 teams. Then you have the Panthers, the Saints, the Vikings, the Seahawks, the Cardinals, the Commanders are the other 5 teams that are 6 5 teams did I say? No. 6 teams. No, 7 teams. Yeah, 7 teams because they're 16. Right? Am I right? Did I count wrong?
Cowboys, Vikings, Cowboys, Eagles.
Cowboys, Eagles, Bears, Lions, Packers, that's 5. Then it's Bucks, Falcons, that's 7. And then Rams, Niners, that's 9.
Yeah.
And then 7 because 16. So then the other 7 that are kind of on the outside looking in, the way I view it is Arizona, Seattle, Carolina, the Saints, the Vikings, the Giants, the Commanders. That's who I forgot, the Commanders. 7. So, and you look at the 7 teams that will kind of be on the outside looking in. I think the Cardinals are probably better than the Giants. The Seahawks will probably be better than the Giants. So really, you could make the case like in the NFC, the Giants in a way maybe are like the 12th or 13th best team in a conference of 16 teams. I think you could put now. I don't know if this is fair because the Giants have dominated Washington. The one team that Daniel Jones has dominated his career has been Washington. So you could probably make a strong case that the Giants will finish better than Washington. So you can't put them ahead of them. But I mean, just roughly here, just right off the top of the dome, without kind of really taking a deep dive, I think you could probably make a case the Giants are like the 12th, 13th best team, 13th best team in the conference, where 7 teams make the playoffs. That's not ideal.
I think the only two that might be worse are
Probably Panthers,
Saints,
and probably I would say Washington.
Yeah.
Just because of the Giants have had Washington's number. Now, talent-wise, I think you can make the case Washington's actually more talented than the Giants, but the Giants, I mean, they've had their number. I think the Giants might both finish with 5 wins, but the Giants will probably have the tiebreaker. So I'll put the Giants at 13, and then it's probably Washington, Carolina, the Saints, right? Because I think Arizona is going to be sneaky good this year. I've said that. And I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but I could see Arizona winning 7-8 games and being competitive.
I think Arizona is going to be pretty decent. They showed Philly game last year, and Dallas, that really jumped out at me. Like, they showed they can win some games. Pure talent wise, though, I got the Giants, and just the NFC, I have the Giants at dead last. Absolutely dead last. I think the Panthers are better than the Giants when it comes to on paper. Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard. You threw Jonathan Brooks in there. I know these are rookies. Jatavion Sanders, Xavier Legette. They do lose Brian Burns, which is basically just a flip over from Carolina to the Giants. But just still on paper, I think the Giants have the worst talent roster-wise in the NFC.
I was on mute. Sorry about that. They're up there. They're up there in the NFL too, just overall. I mean, NFC wise, they're probably anywhere from 13 to 16. NFL, they're probably somewhere from like 30 to 32. You think of the worst rosters in the NFL. I mean, it's like the Panthers are down there.
Yeah.
Patriots
Broncos are last. We know that.
Yeah, Broncos are last.
Probably Patriots second.
The Saints are bad. Saints are up there. I mean, the Saints, come on. Like, after Chris Olave, they've got nobody on that offense. Zero.
Alvin Kamara, but
Alvin Kamara, and that's it. Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams. And that's it. Yeah. And then defensively, they're all right. I mean, you got Tyrann Mathieu, you still got Cam Jordan, DeMario Davis. That's what, 3? I mean,
yeah.
Marshawn, I think you still got Marshawn Lattimore is still around as well. Although older, but yeah, I mean, they're down in terms of offense. If we're ranking teams just overall offense, the Saints might be the worst, right? Maybe, I don't know. Probably not. Probably still New England. I think hands down the worst roster in football is probably Denver and then New England. I think New England. I'm going to say New England because I think Denver, like New England, doesn't have a number 1 receiver. At least Denver's got Courtland Sutton for now. I mean, that might not last very long, but.
Did you watch Courtland Sutton play football last year?
Yeah, I mean,
And then we both know that's not moving the needle too much. I mean,
no. It's better. I still think it's probably better than Kendrick Bourne or Demario Douglas, right?
That is true. Yeah, that's true.
Dude,
I just feel with New England, New England has more.
They have hope. I think that's something. Like, New England has hope. You drafted Drake May. You added Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. You've got KJ Osborne as well, who, was solid in his 3 years in Minnesota. They have hope. The Broncos don't have much hope because while you have Bo Nix potentially starting, Courtland Sutton's on his way out. They don't really have anybody young that they can rely on. I don't know. The Broncos are in a weird spot because, Courtland Sutton's on his way out. At least New England, you have hope of Drake May building chemistry with guys like Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, and those guys becoming your next 1-2 punch, your trio of talent for many years to come. Denver, it's like you have Bo Nix, but there's a good chance, they added Josh Reynolds as well, who is a veteran. This guy's not going to be with the Broncos forever. There's a good chance the Broncos' top 2 receivers this year won't even be with the team next year. That is not helping your rookie quarterback at all, because then he's going to have to learn new receivers all over again. At least New England, there's a clear path. So I will probably set up why. I mean, like future wise, Denver's last.
100%.
And they're still paying Russell Wilson, what, $30 million to go play for the
money.
Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, lots of money.
So, anyway, any closing thoughts? Zach Wilson, who knows? I mean, just saying. Watch out. Can't believe we talked about that back in like February, and it's actually true. Zach Wilson's a Denver Bronco.
That's absolutely insane. But yet we got people on here trolling with quarterback rankings and stuff actually get great jobs. And
yeah, they actually get paid doing that.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
World, huh?
But we're going to get there. We are going to be there because at least we're logical. We make sense. Biased, non-biased, stats to prove it, not just foolishness. But I guess foolishness gets you paid.
Yeah. You're not wrong. In the words of, I don't know, I was going to say something Stephen A. Smith would say. Like he'd say something dumb. He's always saying something dumb.
So I stopped watching them.
It is crazy how much Lakers and Cowboys they talk about on those shows. It's all 24/7. It's LeBron, it's the Lakers, and then it's Dak Prescott and the Cowboys.
Yeah, might get the Knicks here or there.
Yeah, sometimes you get the Knicks.
Just is there anything else going on? Like Oklahoma just won the softball world championship for like the fourth straight time. Not a single thing has been said about that. But what I can tell you, what I do know is the Lakers need a head coach. What I do know is Dak Prescott might not get a contract extension, but he might get a contract extension, but he might not. That's what I can tell you.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And that's another thing. It's always that contract stuff. Always.
Like, why are we pocket watching another man? Like, don't we got something better to talk about? We're just talking about his contract. We're just pocket watching. Let's do something else for a change.
Break down the I don't even know. They talk about that. Well, they never talk baseball. They never talk hockey.
Baseball
talk a lot of hoops and a lot of football. They talk about the Chiefs a good amount. I feel like sort of. No. There's nothing to talk about the Chiefs because they're good. Like there's nothing. They're not doing anything. Like they're the same team. There's not much to talk about with them. You know.
I didn't even know baseball and hockey was a sport the way they don't talk about it.
Yeah, they don't
on those shows at all. Yeah, I guess Chiefs is really not much to say. Probably much to talk about.
I don't know who else. I mean, they used to talk about the Patriots all the time when they were good, but now they don't.
That's over with.
And they talk recently. They've been talking a lot of AFC East. I've seen some Get Up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they talk a lot of AFC East. They always just yell back and forth about like the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins. Who's going to win that division? Like every day. It's like we could come up with all the different arguments. They always come up with something different every day. You know?
Not once has it been mentioned about what the Falcons might do.
Yeah.
Just kind of with everything. They haven't talked about. There's just so many things to talk about. Like, so many. What are the Colts possibly going to do?
Yeah, Colts are an interesting team.
But I do know Dak Prescott may or may not be getting paid. That's the one thing I can tell you. Death taxes, Dak Prescott may or may not be getting paid. That's the only thing I know.
Yep. All right. So that'll do it. Episode 16 of Inside the Huddle in the books. We will see you back here next week. Lots of mandatory minicamp news, I'm sure, will be talked about as mandatory minicamp for many teams start up this week. So stay tuned for that. As always, make sure to please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.